under a different clock.
Jean Delacroix. He's missing.
Okay, good afternoon, brothers.
Yeah.
The Chapter Planning Committee felt, based on some previous chapter discussions, as well as some in the integration teams, that it could be well worthwhile to have something of a report or a talk on the Zavarian Brothers sponsored schools in the United States. There's always talk among us about how do we make XBSS more international in scope, and how can we best relate to each other in this way. So we're fortunate to have with us, as you've seen all week, Patrick Slattery, who is the director of XBSS. Patrick's a graduate of our school in Middletown, Connecticut. He has spent years as a teacher and a principal, and most recently before joining us as the superintendent of schools for the Diocese of Omaha, Nebraska in the United States. I just wanted to add, as I introduce him, as I mentioned earlier today, we had a brief discussion about the ordinary this morning. And Patrick has been witnessing to me about the meaning of the ordinary throughout this week. He doesn't stand on his office or his credentials, but serves in any conceivable way, in a humble way that doesn't look for notice, and it's gotten my notice. So we thank Patrick very much for all the work he does for us in XBSS and for the quality of his presence and work here.
Thank you, Brother John. Thank you all for allowing me to be here. It's an honor to be here. It's been an honor to share meals with you and share friendship and kinship in the hallways and simply get to know you all better. I do appreciate this opportunity. As Brother John had mentioned, the internationality theme and that connectedness as a network as a whole, that's very much a theme I'm going to finish my talk on and actually hope to invite some conversation and dialogue on. We talk very much in the schools about the importance of personal, enduring relationships, and we take that language from the Zavarian Brothers, and it means a great deal. And I think before I can get to that point about talking about internationality and collaboration as a whole, it might help for you to understand a little bit more about me and my journey and what's brought me back into the Zavarian Brothers community, again, to help give some frame of reference for the conversation that we'll have. For the English-speaking folks, I am going to try and resurrect my French, so you might want to throw your headphones on here for a moment. Here we go. And to the Français, I apologize now if I massacre some words. J'ai aimé rencontrer les frères.
I'm very pleased to have been able to meet the brothers from Kenya, Congo, and Haiti. I would, of course, like my French to be a lot better than it is at the moment. I studied French for 7 years at school, but I have to say that I've forgotten the language because I've never really practiced it or used it. As I was saying to some of the brothers just the other day at lunch, the only time I ever used my French was when I was working at McDonald's. It sounds funnier in French than it does in English. So a French family who were on holiday came to order their food at the counter, and I was very proud to be able to say to them, "Voulez-vous des pommes frites avec un Big Mac? Would you like some fries with that?" So that's right, 7 years of studying French, and that's about all I knew how to say. Pommes frites with your Big Mac. Brothers, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for welcoming me to your general chapter. And of course, I want to thank the translator and Google Translate in particular for helping with my French.
I'm switching back to English. You can all tell me at dinner just, how many words I killed there, but I appreciate your patience. I'd like to break my talk into two parts. The first part is more personal, as I shared, so that you can come to understand me a little bit better, so that we can eventually have those conversations about collaboration from a place of understanding. So two parts. The first part, more personal to my experience with mission and education, and the second part will be focused on XBSS, what we currently do, and what we hope to do in the future. I hope the first part of my talk informs the second. I've been working in education for 25 years now. I started as a mathematics teacher, but quickly worked my way into administration. Most of my experience is in Catholic education, and I've come to learn that people not familiar with Catholic education make assumptions about those who lead in Catholic schools, at least in America. Those not familiar at all with Catholic education sometimes assume everyone who works in a Catholic school must be a priest or must be religious, a religious brother or sister. Reiterating a fact you already know, I am not a Xaverian brother. I am married to my wife, Beth. I have 2 children, a son who is 18 and a daughter who's 20. But again, as an example of people making assumptions, when I first became a principal and administrator of a Catholic school, I began to receive mail like this. Father Patrick Slattery. The longer I stayed in Catholic education, apparently I was elevated up to Monsignor Patrick Slattery. When I started working for even more schools, the superintendent role, so now I was working with 70 Catholic schools and 20,000 students, I was elevated even higher to Archbishop Patrick Slattery. This is a credit card application. If you want to know how much credit an archbishop gets, right here. You would think, now that I'm working with, and I'm a collaborator with the Xaverian Brothers, I might be confused as a Xaverian brother. You might assume I get mail that calls me Brother Patrick Slattery. That could make sense. But no, mais non. One piece of mail, surprisingly, has called me Sister Patrick Slattery. I don't get that one. But, Sister Patrick Slattery. I assure you, I am not a religious sister. I like to joke about these pieces of mail, particularly Sister Patrick Slattery, but they do relate in a small way to this notion of collaborators. No, I'm not a Xaverian brother. I'm not a priest. I'm not an archbishop. I'm surely not a religious sister. But I do believe in the great work that all of you do. I do want to be a part of that greater Xaverian Catholic community. Like many of the Xaverian brother collaborators, we want to be a part of living out this Xaverian mission. The description of the Xaverian charism states, "We Xaverian brothers, associates, and collaborators are a true religious family, striving to fulfill the spiritual aspirations that Theodore James Ryken had for his congregation." I know I speak for many of the educators in our 13 Xaverian Brother-sponsored schools when I say that we are drawn to this notion of being a part of something greater, a part of this Xaverian Brothers religious family. We may not be brothers ourselves, but we are drawn to the charism. We are drawn to the mission, and we seek to carry on and live this mission in our personal vocation of education. I am a graduate of Xaverian Brothers-sponsored school, as Brother John had mentioned. I attended Xavier High School in Middletown, Connecticut. I had this pretty cool theology and English teacher named Brother Larry Harvey, who taught me English and theology, and he did a wonderful job teaching us immature boys how to be a man like Christ. I don't think he's aged much looking at that picture. He looks pretty good. In addition to the influence of my parents, I credit the Xaverian brothers who educated me at Xavier to have compassion and care for others. Their influence on my upbringing made me want to become either a doctor or a teacher as I entered college so that I could give back to society more directly in my work. While my path to become a teacher is another story for another day, it was through the common, ordinary, unspectacular flow of my days in college that I felt a gradual call to become a teacher. I want to return to that word collaborator. I became a teacher and a Catholic school administrator because the mission of Catholic education spoke to me. I wanted students to learn more than just mathematics or history or chemistry. I firmly believe that if our Catholic schools only educate the mind, then we have failed. Catholic education must also educate the heart and soul of the student. Earlier this week, I listened to the discussion on poverty, and one of our Xaverian brothers in this room spoke of the moral poverty that exists around the world. I see much of that moral poverty in the United States. I know our Xaverian brothers-sponsored schools can help here. Yes, we can make strong students in the sciences and arts who may go on to find great jobs, but we also need to build moral citizens who care about their peers and the broader world. We must educate a workforce that understands their moral responsibility to address social justice issues, not just make an income to provide for their own family. The educators in our Xaverian Brothers-sponsored schools relate to the mission, the charism, the spirituality of the Xaverian Brothers. Most of these educators want to educate the whole child, not just the mind of the student. They want to collaborate with you, the Xaverian Brothers, in this greater mission. Let me give two examples of why it is so important today to be intentional in protecting and strengthening our shared mission. I want to speak of the first school I ever worked at, right after I graduated college. The school is not a Xaverian Brothers school, but it had a wonderful mission of serving economically poor students and students with learning challenges. The boys at the school were from very diverse backgrounds, came to us from some very tough, crime-ridden neighborhoods. Many of them came from single-parent households or were raised by grandparents. Many of the students struggled because of learning disabilities. I have the school's mission statement from 20 years ago up on the screen, and I underlined a key part where the school's mission speaks of educating students from a broad range of socioeconomic and racial backgrounds. The school also specifically called attention to wanting to help students who were underachieving, not doing well, academically in their prior school. These were the faces of my students. Diverse. At a point in the private school's history, a new principal was hired. In time, he decided to change the mission of the school. And because the school did not belong to any larger body, such as a religious order or a diocese or even a government entity, there was no one to stop him from changing that mission. Today, the school's mission statement reads, "Our mission is to maximize the potential of every student in mind, body, and spirit." While that mission statement sounds nice, you will notice the school has removed all references to helping students from a broad range of socioeconomic backgrounds. The school removed references of helping students who struggle. Today, the school serves predominantly the wealthiest of families in America. Tuition costs $33,600 for a day student and $57,400 for a boarding student. Sadly, the mission has changed. The wonderful legacy of the school to help the marginalized is now lost. I tell this story because it reinforces for me the importance of protecting mission. We all know there are fewer Xaverian brothers in our American schools, and thus we collaborators need to be ever more diligent to help protect and promote all that you have given us and all that we share with you. The Xaverian brothers are at the foundation of our schools, and we collaborators must honor that and be intentional in ensuring all faculty and staff understand this mission and never let it fade away. Xaverian sponsorship and the work of the XBSS office is intended to help in this regard. While we collaborators can never replace the brothers, and that is not at all our expectation, our school leaders and the work of XBSS can play a crucial role in protecting mission and in perpetuating our Xaverian spirituality, charism, and mission. Brothers, I know you are discussing some very challenging topics at this chapter. My favorite quote from Theodore Ryken is that nothing special is achieved without much effort, labor, and zeal. I find that quote has made so much sense to me in my lifetime. All great accomplishments stem from tremendous hard work and sacrifice. Brothers, if there is just one point in my entire talk you remember, besides Sister Patrick Slattery, I hope it is this. The Xaverian Brothers, your history, your legacy, your work at this general chapter, and the mission, charism, and spirituality you share with all of us associates and collaborators, it inspires us. It has had a profound impact on our lives. We collaborators want to share in that ministry, share in that spirituality, and be a part of this mission. We want to ensure that our schools honor the legacy of the Xaverian Brothers. Unlike that first school I worked at, we want to do everything we can to ensure our schools always remain vibrant Xaverian Catholic schools. There are about 132,000 schools in America. 98,000 are public schools, government schools. 34,000 are private schools, many with no religious affiliation at all. They educate the mind, but not the heart. Of those private schools, 7,000 are Catholic. Of those 7,000 Catholic, 13 of them are Xaverian Brother-sponsored schools. Our 13 schools are unique because the Xaverian Brothers' mission is unique. We want to ensure this mission is protected so that our schools are always excellent Xaverian Catholic schools. We want to ensure that no one person can come into our schools and change who we are, what we believe, how we educate, as happened at the first school I worked at. Our schools are bigger than one person, and we must be intentional in our XBSS efforts to ensure that all of our teachers, educators, and staff understand the mission, protect the mission, and ideally live the mission. I'd like to share just one more story to reinforce why mission, particularly a Catholic mission, is important to me, as I know it is to all collaborators. One of my greatest joys in my life is my children, most days. I'm ready for them to go to college on some days, if I'm being honest. Educating my children in the Catholic faith has always been important to me. Allowing them to be educated in a Catholic school has always been important to me. Because of the moral poverty that exists in so many of their peers, it is important to me that they have an education rooted in faith, not just academics. It's a picture of my son when he was younger, so probably, 7, 8 years old. Here's my son today, ready to go to college. Now I'm going to show you a picture of an 18-year-old teenage boy's bedroom. And I want you to be brutally honest. You're going to notice two things right away. Two things. Let's be honest what we see in his bedroom. He's a what? He's a slob. He's messy. And he's what, Brother Larry? He's a Red Sox fan, absolutely. He's a slob and he's a Red Sox fan. But can you look closer? And it's hard in the lighting. Do you see anything else? I'll zoom in.
What was that?
A rosary. His Bible, open. The book at his side is his Bible, which many nights he reads before going to sleep. His rosary is always near for his time of prayer. The particular day I took the photo, I went to see what scripture passage he was reading. He was reading Matthew's Gospel, and he was circling a passage about not worrying, to trust God. He was reading this particular scripture at the time he was waiting to hear from the colleges to which he applied. My son turned to scripture during a time he felt nervous and anxious. While he did not attend a Xaverian Brothers school because there were none where he lives, his story does highlight the importance of Catholic education. My son has made his faith life as important a factor as his academic life. This is what Xaverian Brothers-sponsored schools are called to do as well. The brothers' emphasis on the Martha and Mary story is a wonderful example for all of us collaborators, and it's a story we often use in helping to form our new teachers. Our educators are very good at being Martha. They know the tasks ahead of them, and they do them well. But we collaborators can learn much from you brothers when it comes to contemplation and prayer, strengthening our spiritual lives, and being more like Mary. So let me use those points to lead to the second part of my talk, some specifics about XBSS today and what we hope to accomplish, because what we hope to accomplish has its roots in your work and your legacy. In the 27th General Chapter, there was a directive that stated, we propose an inclusive examination and assessment of both the corporate members and XBSS models with respect to effectiveness and sustainability for the future. From that directive, Brother Ed Driscoll commissioned much work and review of the sponsorship efforts within XBSS. Many listening sessions were held in the communities of all 13 American schools. Data was collected, input analyzed and shared, and eventually growing out of all that work and research and conversation was a newly designed XBSS office, which includes my role as executive director, that of Ben Horgan, our formation director for the lay staff in the schools, and Brother Richard Lunny, who serves as associate director within the office. In addition, the corporate members of XBSS now include 11 people, 4 Xaverian brothers and 7 lay leaders who work with my office and school board leadership to help protect and preserve the Xaverian Catholic mission at the schools. I could spend a great deal of time explaining the governance role within the XBSS model, but that is perhaps too large a topic to do here. I'd be happy to explain it further with any brother during the remainder of our time here. In addition, Ben Horgan, whose name I just mentioned, will be arriving this Sunday to join you all at the chapter. Ben's role as formation director is not intended to imply he is the future of formation for the Xaverian Brothers. He is not. That is not his role, nor would we ever think it our qualification as collaborators. But rather, Ben and our XBSS office as a whole seeks to help form lay teachers and staff for their specific vocation. Recalling my earlier story about a leader who changed the mission of a school, XBSS seeks to educate and form lay teachers and staff to know and live through their own personal vocation, the Xaverian charism, history, and mission. We desire to help schools form these lay individuals to understand they are not just math teachers or music teachers or soccer coaches, but they are teachers and coaches in a Xaverian Catholic school, and that means something more. They are held to a higher responsibility. We challenge them to grow in their own personal faith, grow in their understanding of the Xaverian charism, and ideally help the students to do so in return. Many of our schools no longer have brothers present. So how do we continue to ensure our teachers, students, and communities understand the mission of the Xaverian Brothers if there are no brothers or so few brothers present? How do we teach our students about Theodore Reichen, of this Xaverian charism and spirituality with so few brothers in the schools? These questions speak to why we have this sponsorship model. The Xaverian Brothers have warmly welcomed collaborators into this broader ministry. Please let me be clear again that no one of us lay collaborators believe in some way that we can replace the brothers, nor do we think we are a means of perpetuating or continuing the congregation. That is the work of the brothers. Said differently, we do not assume to bring to our schools the same qualities and formation and lived experience that you all do, but we do hope to perpetuate, share the Xaverian spirituality through intentional formational activities within the schools. I want to explain, I know our U.S. brothers are very familiar, but for our international brothers, our office, the XBSS office, brings together all new people in the schools quite regularly to explain to them the mission, the history, the charism. So the picture that you have behind you was 2 new principals, administrators that were coming to work at our schools. And we invited several brothers from the area to come help educate these new individuals on what it means to work in a Xaverian school. Our students come together every March of a certain number of students come together every March. So the picture you have behind you is from a retreat where we have about 110 students from across the 13 schools come together and learn more about who Theodore Ryken was, learn more about the Xaverian charism and Xaverian spirituality. It's very much a time of prayer and retreat and discussion. The picture that you have up there now are 2 collaborators, 2 associates who come and talk to the students about what it means to be a student in a Xaverian school, and again to talk about the history and charism that is all around us. There's more pictures of the students at the retreat. And a key function every year with Brother Richard Lunny taking a very key role is, again, educating all new teachers into our 13 schools. When I leave Rome 2 weeks from now, we are going to have 81 teachers come to Baltimore from all 13 schools, and we're going to work with them in a retreat setting for 2.5 days to share more about what it means to be working in a Xaverian school. We've invited brothers from the area to come talk about their lived experience being a brother, to really help these teachers understand the mission they need to help bring back to their communities. A great reason why Ben Horgan and I are grateful to be present at this general chapter is so that we can continue to learn from all of you, so we can return to our schools in America and help them further understand their unique call of working in a Xaverian school. As I said earlier, and one of my greatest points in this talk, we and collaborators are inspired by you. Inspiration is a wonderful thing. Few people remain in an organization or community if they don't find inspiration. There are 132,000 schools in America. Those of us in XBSS are inspired to work in schools that you have created. We could work anywhere, but we choose to collaborate with you. We trust you. We admire your humility, compassion, simplicity, and zeal. Our XBSS schools have taken these qualities of trust, humility, compassion, simplicity, and zeal and made them cornerstones to our understanding of the spiritual values of a Xaverian brother's education. The directives of the 27th General Chapter to reassess XBSS has also led to the creation of a new strategic plan. It required of us to assess our current strengths and what more we can do looking into the future. XBSS will be focusing on several areas in the years ahead. I'm not going to discuss all of them, but I will discuss a few that are most relevant to our conversation here. First, we will continue to strengthen our formation programs within the schools. It is of the utmost importance that we not forget where we came from. Perpetuating or sharing our Xaverian Catholic identity and history is most important. As part of these efforts, our office is coordinating a very thorough review of the documents we use to help educate and form faculty and staff in the schools. In 1998, Brother Ed Driscoll crafted a document for the schools called Mission, Vision, Values, Calls, Goals, and Criteria. The document truly helps schools and lay educators better understand their role as a collaborator. But 20 years has passed. The world has changed a little bit. And in great discussion with the brothers, particularly Brother Ed, Brother Larry, Brother John Hamilton, our office has embarked on writing an updated version of Brother Ed's original 1998 work. This work is informed by the language and documents the brothers have provided to us. Lay teachers, with input from the brothers, have been working for the past year on adapting the language surrounding the spiritual values and how our schools are called to live the mission. We are using the fundamental principles, Brother Reggie's Charism Project document, and other core Xaverian Brother documents to guide our work. We are seeking to bring clarity to our schools, students, and teachers on what they are called to be as a Xaverian Catholic school. I could spend 2 hours explaining that in more detail. I'm going to put up one slide. So this is draft language. This is language that for the past year we have edited, talked about, had meetings, and it's just a piece of it. But again, we were looking to really put on paper for our educators, for our schools, what are you called to do? What are you called to be? You're not just good private schools. You're not just good Catholic schools. You are Xaverian Catholic schools. So what does that call you to be? What does that call you to do? And these calls, which will still be edited again, I'm sure, and have some conversation, speak a great deal to the direction we're hoping to give some of our schools. So briefly, the call to embrace our Catholic identity and the charism of the Xaverian Brothers as stewards of the Church's mission of evangelization within its ministry of education. The call to a spirituality flowing from a contemplative stance, which is formed by God's presence in the common, ordinary, unspectacular flow of everyday life. The call to be formed in the spiritual values of compassion, humility, simplicity, trust, and zeal. The call for a challenging academic and co-curricular program that promotes the development of the whole person and their unique giftedness. The call to recognize our Christian responsibility to work for justice and peace by responding to the needs of others. The call to build diverse and inclusive communities that encourage enduring personal relationships through an understanding of culture and perspectives. And it's that last call that will bring me to the final point of my conversation, that we do want our schools to be more intentional in their relationship with the entire network, not just the 13 schools. The final document that will be produced, and these calls are just a small piece of that final document, ideally will be completed this fall after it is further reviewed by the corporate members, by some more brothers, by the schools themselves. The strategic plan also focuses on funding, a big part of my role moving forward if we are going to be talking about new programs and new ways to collaborate and new ways to help form our educators that oftentimes cost money. And a big part of my job will be to go out and try and raise some of those funds so that we do not have to ask the brothers for money to fund some of these ideas and projects, or that we have to ask the schools to pay even more. The strategic plan also will discuss, have us look at and discuss governance moving forward. While not an issue today, it is on the forefront of many of our schools' minds to look at the governance model of our schools over the next 10 years, given the changing dynamics of our Xaverian Brothers. But the piece I want to finish on, and the piece that I want to now invite some conversation, comes back to that last call, that last bullet, and it's this notion of internationality. I had the first conversation on this topic with Brother Dominique when he was in the States not too long ago. You saw earlier that my son is a big Red Sox fan, and that came from Dad. Dad brainwashed him to be a Red Sox fan. I tried to brainwash Brother Dominique to be a Red Sox fan. So I took Brother Dominique to Fenway Park, told him the New York Yankees stink, bought him a Boston Red Sox hat, and trying to teach him the good teams in America. But in between taking Brother Dominique to a baseball game, we spent nearly 3 hours talking about his experience as a brother, his experience back home, his experience in the schools. And Brother Dominique with much compassion and much understanding and passion, spoke of his desire to see ways we can have our American schools and students and teachers build stronger relationships with the many ministries that our brothers are involved in. And so we will be forming some committees in America from our school side to see what that could look like. And I know I've talked with a few of our brothers from Kenya and Congo and Haiti about possible ways we can partner moving forward. And I know there are challenges that 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 miles between our schools create. But it is a desire of our schools, of our educators, to see what is possible. And like I said before, we feel we are called as a Zavarian Brothers School to build those relationships further. And so with that, I'd like to open up for some conversation discussion as it relates to that internationality, as it relates to those possibilities. We're not going to answer all those today, but we need to start with a dialogue and a conversation so that I can go back to our administrators and share more with them. So I thank you for your time.
Merci à Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick. That was all very interesting and very enriching. So, if anyone has any comments or questions, perhaps, for Patrick, the ball's in your court.
I'd like to thank Patrick for his presentation and let each of the brothers present know what a joy it is to work with Patrick and Ben in the XBSS office. You get a sense of the joy that he brings to his work and the dedication, and we have the chance to work with him and Ben every day and experience that same dedication, and it's contagious. And with the new strategic plan that we have developed, it's a revitalization of the Zavarian presence in the United States through all the schools. And I want to thank Patrick for the work he has done. It's been outstanding. Thank you.
I'd like to suggest that oftentimes as brothers, especially as we age significantly and see the diminishment of our presence in our schools, we always are concerned about who is going to carry on. I think we are in very good hands. Thank you, Patrick.
Merci beaucoup, Patrick, pour tout le...
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Patrick, for the work that you do with the schools, and particularly in terms of conveying the spirit of our charism. And thank you for your presentation as well. When I look at what you're doing with the schools in the United States, well, it has to be said that we're, have yet to reach that level in the Congo. If I think about Kasenga amongst the teachers who work for us, I don't know even how much our teachers know fully about our charism. Now, how do we get to that level? Because in terms of a charism, it's something which is kept, nurtured, developed, and passed on to other people. And you've done this in many different ways in the United States, and we haven't been able to do that. And I would have thought that that's the case in Kenya as well. So I would like your team to try to help us to get the ball rolling, as it were, perhaps through a formation session. We have a schools committee, which is directed by Brother Anani. And in Kenya, I'm sure there's a similar kind of a schools committee, perhaps in Bungoma. So perhaps a delegation from your, perhaps we could work with you, members of these two committees or whatever they all could work with you, so that we can go in to do something very similar in our schools, something which is really specific, concrete, so that we can then begin to convey our charism and pass it on to the people that work with us in the schools. Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. And again, I think when I share, I'm writing those down. When I share that with the schools back home, they're going to say that makes a lot of sense as well. I would reiterate one point. A lot of what's happening with our XBSS schools, don't give me too much credit. A lot of it was already happening. Ben and I and Brother Richard are looking to just take it to another level. But there's been a lot of these retreats and intentional formation efforts with teachers and staff for 20 years. And so, it takes time. You got to get that ball rolling. You're exactly right. It starts slow. But I think there are many of us that would be very interested in talking further to see how we can help, specifically, concrete, get that ball rolling.
I also wish to say thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and on the good work that you do for us in the schools. Your presentation has opened my eyes in several ways. One of the things we shared here the other day on the vow of poverty was the different forms that poverty takes. When I looked at the figures you projected there on the tuition of a student going to a day school and the tuition of a student going to a boarding school, if I'm not wrong, I read $57,000. That's like 2 times or even more the operating budget of a school in Kenya for more than 50 students. That is information that calls for reflection. I think it can awaken the minds and hearts of many people when we see these differences, dynamics in different worlds. So I will second the idea of Brother Joseph, beginning from the very basics, formation of the teachers. When people come to work with us in our schools, the best thing to have them understand and take into heart is, what are we after? The values, our spirituality, our charism. When they carry that along with them, then the students who come for us for education will be in the safe hands. That is something we are not doing. And with modern technology, we don't have to take too long to start in that area. Virtual collaboration can be a way in which that can start. Materials shared that you use in the USA, if they are shared with us, can be a good beginning point without necessarily physical presence. Another area that I see of a possibility is on the student retreats. I don't envision that we will be sending students to participate in retreats with the students from other schools, but eventually, who knows? At some point, maybe that can happen. So there are many areas that I see for collaboration between the schools in the United States and the schools in Africa, especially those that are in the very, very infancy stage. They can grow much, much better than maybe where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. The shared materials, the collaboration through technology makes perfect sense, and that doesn't need a committee to happen. And that's why I've been asking many of you at lunch and dinner, how is the Wi-Fi? To me, that we need to start that this school year. Our students come back in a month. That just makes perfect sense. It's easy. Those are things that we can look to help share. I think our students in due time would have an amazing experience if there ever were the opportunity to have some of the students from abroad come to the XBSS retreat. And again, maybe that pieces of that fall on me to go see if we can find donors or funders who would like to bring that to fruition to make that happen. I appreciate your comments, Brother Raphael.
Patrick, just a question. Where do you see the schools that are developing now in Congo and Kenya within the XBSS? Or has there been a discussion regarding an envisioning of how XBSS also embraces the schools that exist in Africa? Then the second question has to do with, has any discussion also developed regarding, I'm trying to look for the right word because exposing is not the right word for me here, but letting our students in the XBSS system to also possibly get to be in Africa. The only reason why I'm asking this is because I'm aware that in some of our XBSS schools, there is a program that exists, and I think it's for the upper students, in which we bring some of the students outside the country, like Bolivia and anywhere. But now, at that time, we didn't have schools. So we didn't have schools in Africa. So now that we do have that, and we do have structures of the brothers in Congo and Kenya, do you foresee that also as a possibility?
I think to your first question, Brother Reggie, how do we embrace the schools in Africa? That's precisely where I hope this conversation is a start to that. And also the strategic plan that has been crafted is asking that very question. So have the conversations started in committee meetings? No, but this was that opportunity to formally, in front of the general chapter, share that it is a primary objective moving forward for our office to explore those ways that we may embrace those schools. And as much as we'll have conversations in America through technology, through email, through video conferences, Wi-Fi connections that allow us to do that, would love to try and engage in some of those conversations on a more global level. So they'll be happening. The question, yes, our students in most, if not all of the schools do have what we call service trips. And many of those students, 2, 3, 4 times a year, the schools are sending students to the Dominican Republic, to Haiti, to other areas, typically South America. But our administrators have asked that same question that you have asked. We are committing resources to go to the Dominican Republic to serve for a week in a community. And so that even our administrators are asking that question, should we be looking at perhaps sending our students? There's a lot of dynamics, there's a lot of issues to work through on that, but it's a question that has been asked, and I'm sure it's a question that will continue to be asked, and we'll have those conversations.
Patrick? Oh, okay, I'll wait.
Okay, merci beaucoup pour.
Thank you very much for a very deep and profound presentation. What I would like to do is talk a little bit about Africa. Having heard you do such a presentation, I'm wondering if you could perhaps develop something or some sort of initiative that could then maybe start to be implemented in Africa. I know the reality in Africa is not at all the same. And XBSS is probably not something I know that you can copy-paste it into Africa. But it would be nice to think about some sort of work that the Kenyans and the Congolese in Africa could do to work together, to try and do something similar maybe. at least, taking into account our own reality, try to follow your example. So I know that, so it's been done in the past. It's been done in the past. Perhaps it should be done again, but it would be good at least to try and find a way to do that.
I think to do something similarly part, not only between Kenya or Congo or Haiti, but I think, again, our students and many of our educators would be very interested in whether it's activities or some form of sharing where we are all collaborating on some similar theme together. We talk often about, within the Zavarian brothers' charism, the common, ordinary, unspectacular flow. Another piece of the charism, or at least of Ryken's life, that many of our educators often come to and often quote, is the building of endearing personal relationships. And I think there's a yearning amongst the American educators working in our schools who have learned so much about the brothers and the history and the charism, and they're asking that question, well, if we have these enduring personal relationships amongst our 13 schools, but our network is so much bigger, the congregation is so much bigger, what can we do to build those relationships with the broader ministries of the brothers, and finding some things to do in common, the similarities, or doing some things similarly. I think that speaks to those calls that I mentioned. I think our U.S. schools are called to find an answer to that and to do something about that.
Just a quick example of that, Patrick. Ed and I met 3 months ago with actually an alum of one of our schools who for a short time was a member of the congregation and then left us and went to university, became a professor of ecology, and has spent most of his work on the environment and trying to save the environment, done a good bit of work in many different parts of the world. So he recently made a gift, part of which funded the science labs in Bungoma, part of which is funding some agricultural work in Congo. And part of his other specialty is actually working with the Pope's encyclical. And it would be a wonderful thing to find some way to even do a collaborative way of even doing something with the encyclical interculturally or internationally with our students, and really trying to see if there's a way to do that. I think there's willingness, certainly on a person like this, on his part, to really see our mission continue and to really take care of one of the most crucial issues in our world today. Ed, I don't know if you want to say something about even that meeting with him.
I guess the one word that's been staying with me in the last 24 hours has been commitment. And I want to thank you, Patrick. You've been a real inspiration to the team, and I think a real example of commitment to your own faith life. And I think that's where the base of sponsorship starts. I'm just going to encourage our brothers from the African regions to really look at that with an open mind and an open heart. What Larry is saying is, I think there's a new consciousness among our own alumni, especially the Americans who have some resources. We just have to be able to tell our story. And I think one of the most important stories is John Delacroix, c'est l'espoir pour les élèves, no? Nous représentons l'espoir. And that's also a key to the spirit of sponsorship. I really believe, I can go back to 2006, and maybe Placide will remember, Didier from the college was at our assembly, and I'm convinced for the African brothers that those who have been working with you the longest already know your charism. and you just have to ask them and have to engage them in helping you to articulate that. And I just want to thank you for bringing the presentation today. Your French is very good. And to move forward, taking small steps, but we do it as we say a lot of things, march on with faith.
Patrick, first, just a point of information. Brother Jean Delacroix spoke of some Americans who worked at the collège back in the 70s. As far as I know, they were Peace Corps volunteers. That was before I got there, but I heard stories about the time when the Peace Corps worked there. I'd like to know whether you are in any communication with the Institute in Bruges, or with Xaverian College in Manchester, or with the Alumni Association of Clapham Old Boys. They have no school anymore, but they stick together and they're very interested in the brothers that taught them, who are all deceased now.
Not yet. Brother Larry and Brother Art, you guys had a trip to Bruges within the last few months, and they had actually shared kind of, I'm going to let Brother Larry speak to it, but my answer and Ben Horgan's answer was absolutely, you know, that sounds very exciting, let us know what we need to do, but I'll let Brother Larry speak to that.
So the first thing with regard to the Institute, you can shut your microphone off.
Oh, yes.
This year, the Institute will celebrate 175 years of its foundation as the cradle of Xaverian education, and one of their main celebration, they actually intend to be an international celebration. So one of the former assistant heads of that school, Mr. Flor Will, is planning that celebration and wants to plan a way to include some part of that being celebrating Xaverian education in America, in the UK, as well as Xaverian education in Africa. And his thought is a very simple Flemish song that has to do with Deo Gratias, thanking God, sung in very, very different, many parts, and gradually building to that. One of his thoughts is there a way to actually include the voices from our schools around the world as part of that that concert that will actually be held in the concert hall in Bruges. So they're very much aware of wanting to connect with us and wanting to celebrate Xaverian education. And then I'll just mention on the commitment and the funding side, Xaverian College in Manchester annually takes up a collection to support, especially our works in Congo, and they're very interested in remaining and keeping in touch. And then Peter has kept in touch with some of the old boys from Mayfield and Clapham as well, I think. Peter?
Yeah, that's been, Brother John Hart many years ago began activities to stay involved with them, but sort of the way it came about is intriguing in a way. The brothers in England always had a cemetery in Mayfield. It's not the only location where brothers were buried, but it is a prime one. That's in the very southern part of England. I remember as a very young brother, one of the English brothers was at our college and would talk about the time during World War II where the brothers could go out and watch the bombers coming from across the channel heading to London. It's sort of, you know your geography, you can envision sort of the location. But anyway, it had become very neglected, and the brothers, the old boys at Clapham. Now, Clapham is near London. Mayfield is southern part of England. By accident, one of the members of from that school visited and was sort of disgusted with the looks of the place. It was not being cared for in spite of significant money we were putting into the care of it, and they contacted us. And so anyway, to make a long story short, the last number of years they have taken on the responsibility to maintain that cemetery and do a variety of other activities that also highlight their heritage with us. as a result of that activity, they've actually got now the old boys at Mayfield involved in the process. If you went to the cemetery today, you would see all the headstones, not quite headstones, but crosses, have all been replaced by the Mayfield old boys. So it's an ongoing, I receive communications from them regularly. When they took over sort of the maintenance, they fired the ones that we had because we were too far away to hold them accountable. And they are very definitely holding the current ones. And what we pay for it is significant. We help in some of the funding, but they also raise funds to supplement that. So it's an interesting development. They would love contact with us. Last summer, I think a number of them, several of them came to the United States or up in New England, and they also are doing some research on the connections of the brothers and so on. So it's a wonderful potential, and they're open. If you wanted to go over there to visit them, and they'd love to meet with you. They also continue a number of athletic activities with younger people. As you can imagine, they are not quite a prime soccer team. But they do have soccer and other activities that are part of the alumni activities of the Clapham School, which still continues in a slightly different format.
I just want to share a little anecdote from about 20 years ago. It was on one of my first trips to the Congo, and we were flying from Brussels to Kinshasa. And on board, there were, I guess, a dozen youngsters, no more than 16, 17, 18-year-olds, coming from St. Andrew's Abbey School outside of Bruges, and they were heading into the Congo to do 4 weeks of volunteer work. And it was a very impressive thing, and I think what it points to is it is possible. That's 20 years ago. We also had volunteers in both Haiti and Bolivia who spent a year or 2 years with us. So those things are again, very, I think, possible, but I think they are, as Patrick so well illustrated, there has to be faith-based. And I think our emphasis has to be on relationship more than anything else.
Just to, since we are talking of anniversaries, I'm just wondering, on the 26th of November, 2 years from now, we are actually celebrating the 150th anniversary of the death of our founder. And I was just wondering if anyone has been mindful of that crucial event, because since we are talking about a celebration among our schools, I'm just wondering, have we forgotten about this momentous event that is about to take place? 150 years is an important landmark in any congregation's history. I'm just throwing it out there because if we are going to celebrate, as Larry has pointed out, the 175th anniversary of this, well, can it not be tied with the fact that we are also celebrating the 150th anniversary of the death of Bryken? The question? Can we not, again, let me repeat the question if it was not translated properly. All these talks that we are having about celebrating the 175th anniversary of our school systems, can it not be tied also with the celebration of the 150th anniversary of the death of Theodore James Ryken?
Reg, I can't answer for everyone, but I would think that is a possibility. I think we're just going to need to see who can head the effort.
Our schools in America do celebrate every year what they call Founders Week. And Brother Larry, I don't know if you started that or... Let it be noted. Yeah. But Founders Week does conclude each year on the anniversary of Riken's death, and so it's yeah, so I mean, that's a piece when it comes to 150th from the school side. Our schools are so used to celebrating an entire week of, you know, really drawing extra attention in that week. I mean, everything that I've talked about isn't just 1 week or one event. I mean, it's year round, it's infusing into all of our programs, but Founders Week is kind of a little added extra attention to everything and anything Xaverian, and that perhaps could be in a way, Brother Reggie, when it comes to 150th, we could do a little more on the school side. But that also got me thinking, what we do for Founders Week could so easily be shared with the other schools, Kenya, Congo, Haiti. I mean, these are things that don't cost anything. They're just resources, materials, videos, paper. I mean, very easily could share that with all of you with a simple translation so that the documents work for you guys.
Just, we do celebrate it also. At least, I believe in all the congregation, but definitely in Kenya, the 26th of November to the 3rd of December is a special moment for us. So this is something that we have been doing for years.
Great. I didn't mean to imply you guys, I was just saying on the school side, our schools have been, you know, modeling after the brothers in that regard so that the schools could share in Founders Week as well.
Pour revenir à ce que le frère Ed a dit, il y a eu...
Well, just to get back to what Brother Ed said, it wasn't too long ago, a few years ago, they had students from Belgium who came over to the Congo to do some kind of internship in the schools in Congo. And it was very beneficial for both the students and the schools in the Congo as well, because for the students, I think it was a wonderful experience for them, absolutely magnificent, because first of all, just imagine the setting and the relationships they were able to establish and the spirit they were able to feel. But just to come back to what was said in terms of the spiritual charism within our schools, I don't think, you know, we shouldn't have too high expectations here. Now, let's say we're building a school in Likasi, and there's a school which is also some progress has been made in Bongoma, and they're our schools. So rather, they're the private Xaverian Brothers schools with the Xaverian label stuck very firmly on the side. So what I'm saying rather is we shouldn't wait, We shouldn't wait. We need to try to imbue the staff with Xaverian spirit and charism now. All the people we work with, the staff, the teachers, the students, and I believe that slowly but surely the schools will develop and the spirit will develop and will become incarnated throughout, within all the people we are involved with. The schools in Likasi have a certain history and, our predecessors did wonderful work in those schools. You just have to see in our schools in Kasenga, when the brothers left, it was a disaster. So it's really. But when the brothers went back, they were so pleased. The people in the village were so pleased to see brothers go back. So these schools have a history, and the brothers have really left a huge. Positive impact, and now it's up to us to make this long-lasting so that we can work together in communion so that we can convey this Xaverian spirit together, perhaps with the help and collaboration of our brothers in the United States. I think that it's all possible, so we shouldn't wait to do this. We should do this as quickly as possible.
De ma part, je voulais compléter le frère François.
I would like to just follow up what Brother Francois said in terms of XBSS. We're together with Richard. Said that there's a lay person going to be doing a lot of work to join the chapter, and Patrick then arrived. And I don't speak great English, but nevertheless, but he speaks really good French. Patrick, that's good. So we were able to have chats, and we have spoken to one another. And I think that what I'd like to say, I'd like to thank him, which he did, of course, for his presentation. But nevertheless, I'd like to. Talk about a little bit about the philosophy, his approach, and the approach that's been adopted. And quite clearly we're in different regions of the world. But that does not exclude the possibility of us being able to adapt what's being done in one place to what we might do where we are. Because the brothers have been in the college for a long time, together with, we know that XBSS had to be changed because the teachers didn't really fully understand what sponsored schools meant. They didn't understand the XBSS. So we had to change the name. But I mean, it wasn't the end of the world just to change the name of the school, to explain, because they didn't really get what sponsored schools meant. And together with Brother Placide, and we've done a lot of work with on that, and we've worked on establishing this charter, which sets out the philosophy of education philosophy in Zavarian schools. And we've set out, what sort of virtues should be promoted, kind of like a moral code, how we can communicate charism to the lay people we work with. And that's making good progress. And when we go back to school again in September, we're going to go around all the different schools and talk about this, talk to the teachers, and of course, in our schools, the schools that we're building, and we're going to really try to apply certain criteria when we recruit staff as well. In the public schools at the moment, of course, we do have non-Catholics in the public schools, state schools, but nevertheless, they are required, and sometimes they don't always like it, but they are kind of required to follow our philosophy. But and I've already mentioned this to Patrick, it will be a good idea for us to continue to exchange ideas, exchange experiences, and, they went on a retreat. Well, we can watch their retreat on YouTube, perhaps. We've got Wi-Fi, we've got the text. We can show the retreats and the text and the documents that they discuss. And all of this, I think, can help us as well, help us in our schools. And to promote these exchanges. And, I'd like to thank you once again. I mean, it's very good that we've been able to meet and have this opportunity to discuss matters.
Okay. I think I'm also very much impressed by Patrick's presentation. And I think from the observation, I like the way the brothers have received it. I see there's some acceptance of what he's doing, and maybe I'm just relating that to the other discussions that we are having during this chapter. If we go with that spirit of at least seeing some positiveness in our presentation, I think things will move well. And I like the way he's taking the questions. It's not giving an impression of this can't work always, but at least in the responses, it's kind of saying there's a possibility we can dialogue on this. And I just like, if we continue with that spirit, I think we shall make some concrete conclusions, and it's giving hope. And then on the other side, I just see the collaboration between the schools, maybe in the US and the Congo and Kenya. Maybe in 20 years to come, I would like we don't create that kind of an atmosphere whereby Kenya and Congo, they just hope that we have to rely on what will come from the US so that we start doing something. So I think it will reach a place whereby we shall have a kind of a culture of dependence, that we have to wait until they give us how they do the retreats and all that. So in my thinking, anybody who is in charge of like a school or something in Congo or in Kenya, at least is a Zavarian, and there's some aspects that you can start or begin a culture that can start there, so that when we are meeting the US, the Congo, and Kenya, at least we can also, as a Kenyan, I can give a culture that this is what we do here. So when the other culture comes in, we just bond and make it stronger. But as the Brother Delacroix said, it should not just be copy-pasted, that this is working there in the US, then also let it be this way. That way, we shall create a culture of dependence, and which will not be good. So let us embrace all the cultures in this collaboration. And I think, maybe it is traditionally that we like maybe receiving, just believing that whatever comes is good. I think that mentality should change, and also we empower ourselves and say we have something. It might be very little, but at least we have something to offer. I think if we go in that direction, it will be one way of building the capacity of the regions that have not developed to that level where you are. Thank you.
If I could just, you have all so much to share with our students as well. I mean, Raphael, I was taken by your comment that the tuition of that school that I had posted was the entire operating budget. I mean, a simple fact like that, in a conversation, if we could arrange face-to-face over Zoom or YouTube, I mean, many of our American students are so narrow-minded. They think they understand the world. They have no concept of what's going on outside of their communities or their town, and they need an education, and our teachers try and bring that, but you offer such worldly experience and can open the minds and the hearts of our students and our teachers, which is, again, another reason that I look forward to that mutual relationship, that I think, again, our schools want to see what they can do to help, but I know there's so much in return that you can offer our students and our staff to learn from you as well.
I just want to make one more statement. To recognize an effort that was made several years back at a time when we were really articulating what the sponsorship was about. And it was an effort made by Brother Placide to work with the faculties in Likasi. And I think he did it for a few years before he was called to do formation work in Kenya. So there is a precedent for moving forward with that. And I want to thank Placide for the initiative. You did that on your own.
Cette collaboration sera vraiment les bienvenue.
This collaboration will be really welcome, of course, not only so that we could share our charism and spirituality, but also this material support as well. Because when we look at schools where we are, some of them, are very run down, such as in Kasenga, and we try to make efforts at the local level to provide them as much support as possible, but they are quite vulnerable, as it were, and we really do need a lot to try to develop and raise the level of education. I remember the former general, I think it was Ignacio from Sacred Heart, and he came to speak to us once, and he said something which I thought was really very impactful and insightful. He said, there's no point having poor education for poor people. If we wish to lift the poor from their poverty and misery, we have to invest. And we're very attached to this in Kasenga, not just in Kasenga and Bumma, same place to Bungoma or wherever. All of our schools which, are quite run down, etc. But, we look at the quality of the schools. We realise there's a huge amount to be done to improve the schools. And I think that this collaboration would be very much welcome, even if you're able to provide some kind of material support. Thank you. I mean, if it's possible, at least.
On va remettre la parole à Patrick pour conclure ou dire un dernier.
Okay, we can give Patrick the floor back. I mean, if he might have a last few words to say, make a couple of recommendations, who knows? And then we will go off for our coffee break. And then at around 6:15, you are invited to meet in your sharing groups. We said that it probably worth continuing with the sharing groups, and then each group can adapt to the way in which they work and share them as they see fit. So from about 6:15 onwards now, please. Patrick, well, he won't necessarily conclude, but he'll just have a few final words to say, and then we will have the coffee break afterwards. Thank you.
I hadn't prepared any final thoughts, but I'm just going to rattle off what's on my mind, or what comes to my mind. I remember walking through Boston years ago, right through the center of Faneuil Hall, which is a very touristy area, and there's a lot of times there's people out, with different causes or selling things, and there was one gentleman, yelling at everybody, save the whales, and, I walk past, and I'm going to get a piece of pizza, and he, scowls at me and says, thanks for not caring. And like, buddy, there's 1,000 causes out there. I like whales. They're pretty. I don't see them often. I don't get out to the middle of the ocean to see whales, but I didn't have a connection to whales. I don't have a particular passion for whales. I don't know much about whales. My point is, people, when you come to know something, when you come to know it intimately, when you come to build relationships with an organization or people or family, you develop a passion for it. It goes back to my earlier comment about inspiration. I was in a very fine job before coming to this job. I wasn't looking for a job. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, cornfields, cows, doing just fine, was happy, was doing good work. And when the job opportunity came across my desk, I went, Zavarian Brothers, Brother Larry, and all the memories of the brothers started coming back to me. But the job was 1,000 miles away, and I still had a student in high school. So I put it away, and I went back to my work. But I couldn't shake it. Sleeping at night, just thinking about just the funny stories of the brothers and the influence they had on me. I hadn't thought about them in a while. I still put it away. A month went by, but it kept nagging at me. It kept drawing at me. And about 3 days before the application deadline, through a lot of prayer and contemplation, through that common, ordinary, unspectacular flow of everyday life, the knock, 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 I couldn't let it go, because the Zavarian Brothers, unlike the whales, were a group, were an entity, were a family that meant so much to me. I had a passion for it. And so the opportunity to finally say, look, forget about the 1,000 miles, we'll work that out. I want to come back and be a part of this family. I want to come back and be a part of this congregation, albeit in my lay role, but it was a vocation of mine. And, I think that's a big piece to these conversations here, to have our schools look beyond just Boston or Baltimore or Kentucky and look to the broader world and look to these potential collaborations with Kenya, Haiti, Belgium, Congo, but it starts with the relationships, because when we build those relationships first, we have a passion, we have a care. We're not just going to walk right past and say, I don't have time for the whales, because we care too much. And I think that's a big part of what I'm hoping starts here today, this afternoon, and just grows, is a collaboration amongst all of us where we can leverage the talents we all bring and see where it takes us. Because again, I'm excited, and I think there is so much hope and potential, despite the challenges, so much hope and potential of where this could take us. So I appreciate the opportunity to have some time with you all, to be invited to speak, and look forward to building those collaborations with all of you. God bless you all for the work that you do and for the energy that you bring to this general chapter. Thank you.
Je m'excuse, je suis un peu lent, très...
I do apologise, I'm a bit slow. But I do have a question, still for Patrick though. What is the role of the fundamental principles in the lives of the students and the staff? I learned in a conversation, I can't remember who it was with, but nevertheless, that the XBSS have a kind of adapted form of fundamental principles which they hand out to the students and the staff. Is that right? And are they kind of like age appropriate texts or teacher appropriate texts? I mean, is that correct?
We very much use the fundamental principles as written. That language is a big part of every staff formation activity. The student retreat, which I showed, which is 5 days, each day has a different theme that correlates directly to the fundamental principles. And we're not changing the language, we're not adapting the language, we are taking the language of the fundamental principles and putting them as themes. All of our schools, all of our meetings, board meetings, all of the prayers, quite often the prayers relate back to some aspect of the fundamental principles. So we absolutely want to make sure students, teachers, administrators read the fundamental principles, talk about the language. We've had some of the same conversations about what does ordinary mean, because on occasion some of our schools will say, well, what do you mean ordinary? We want to be extraordinary. We want our kids to go out and accomplish great things. And we have to say, you're taking it too literally. That's not what we mean when we say, embrace the ordinary. We're not saying don't go out and do great things for the world, but it's our lay folks need that education as well, and the fundamental principles quite often becomes a great resource to further explain the charism and the spirituality. And again, I go back, in that bag right there, I have 10, 15 different pieces of documents we use in our schools, and my goodness, it wouldn't take much to just translate those and share them. I mean, that's to me a very easy thing that's on my to-do list when I get home.
S'il vous plaît, s'il vous plaît.
Hold your horses. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. On the table opposite the chapel, there's a large piece of paper on which you are invited to put down your choice of committee. So you can put down your choice of committee on the piece of paper, and then we'll try and balance it out anyway. So it's according to how you feel or where you